Okay, right, so welcome back to another deck profile video. Today we are going to be covering the updated support from BT17 in relation to Sakuyamon. In not so many words, I have sort of mixed and matched as best as I can to try and find something that best suits my own sort of gameplay style, but I hope that I've now sort of come to a finalization on that. The deck itself, however, you can genuinely mix and match to your heart's content, which is ideal. So you can opt for security attack minus, or you can go DP minus boot like route, or you can even include more yellow-blue combo type stuff. So just to get started in, we'll just go through the deck bit by bit. So first up, we're covering the rookies. Now the rookies, we are playing 4 EX2 Viximons. Essentially this is the egg for the deck. You can opt to use others, however this is my own preference, and I believe this egg definitely gels the best with this deck overall. So it's a mandatory 4-off for me on those, but the inherited effect is when you use an option card of a cost of 2 or more, you get to draw 1 card. So once per turn, your turn effect. Next up, in terms of the rookies, so we have gone for 12 in total, all of a Renamon lineup, so there's no mixing or matching of other Digimon here. The first one, we're going with Renamon from EX2. Essentially, you can reveal the top 4 cards of your deck, add 1 Cubimon, Tamers, or Sakuyamon, as well as 1 Rika to your hand, and then place the rest to the bottom of the deck. The inherited effect is essentially when you use an option card of a cost of 2 or more, you gain 1 memory. So it's a very, very neat rookie-based card. The next 4 we're running with is that of Renamon from BT10. So this one, again, lets you reveal the top 4 cards of the deck. You can add 1 card with plugin in its name and 1 yellow tamer among them to your hand, and then place the rest to the bottom of the deck in any order. Its inherited effect, again, if you use an option card of a cost of 2 or more, one of your opponent's Digimon gains minus 2000 DP for the turn. So it's just a very good 4-off to have. However, you can opt to reduce that specific card. I wouldn't reduce any of the others. The next one is a 4 of the new Renamon from BT17. This particular card lets you reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. You add 1 Digimon card with the relevant lineup, so Cubimon, Tamers, or Sakuyamon in its name, and 1 Rika, or 1 option card with a cost of 2 or more among them to your hand. You return the rest to the bottom of the deck. Its inherited effect is when you use an option card of a cost of 2 or more, you can give one of your opponent's Digimon security attack -1 for the turn, until the end of their turn. Again, solid card to have. This is definitely the mandatory searcher for the deck, because it lets you search anything in this deck, almost. But yes, definitely turn 1, certainly. But otherwise, you can use the alternative versions if you're missing the relevant pieces. Next up, we have... so what we got? We got 10 level 4s. Now I'm going to start all the way back to EX2 again. In this case, we have 4 of Cubimon from EX2. When digivolving, you can reveal the top 3 cards of the deck and add an option card with plugin in its name among them to your hand. Place the remaining cards to the bottom of the deck. Inherited is exactly the same as the EX2 Renamon. You give DP minus 2000 to one of your opponent's Digimon if you have an option card of 2 or more used. Next up, just a 1 of, but we're running 1 Yukomon from EX4. This particular card has both an on-play and a when digivolving effect, but until the end of your opponent's turn, one of your Digimon gains blocker. Its inherited effect is exactly the same as the Cubimon I just shown you, so use an option card of 2 or more, with a cost of 2 or more, sorry, and then you can give one of your opponent's Digimon minus 2000 DP. So it's a good 1-off to have. You can mix and match your ratios here, but however, I just don't feel like this card will even remains in play for 1 turn in the current meta. So it's definitely just a 1-off to have as a defensive sort of solution. but in reality you're going to be using a variety of effects to try and control the board in your own way. Next up, we go all the way back to BT7 with Kazimon. Just a one-off hybrid for game. If you're not familiar with the game or are new to this, it's essentially your game-killing card. As long as you've obviously got the relevant memory. But it can Digivolve over your Tamers for a cost of 2, and it treats your Tamers like a level 3 Digimon. Now, last but not least, we run 4 of the new Cubimon from BT17. This card is exactly what this deck needed, but it's when Digivolving effect lets you play a Rika if you don't already have one in play. So it's good. It's essentially a Kurisarimon from the Diaboromon deck lineup. Its inherited effect, however, is when you use an option card of a cost of 2 or more, one of your opponent's Digimon gains security attack -1, which is exactly the same as the Renamon right here. So it's a good 4 of. Definitely want to be seeing it early game just so you can get your Tamer out into play for no cost. Otherwise, trying to slam hard a Tamer for a 4 cost is actually quite... well, it's annoying because you will be passing turn. So, level 5s. Now, this was where things got really tricky for me because I really like this next card. But I'm running a 2 of Taumon from EX2. Essentially, you can play a Rika Tamer from your hand without paying the cost when Digivolving. And it's not just mandatory to just if you have 1 or less Tamers in play, you can just do that whenever you want. So yeah, it was a bit heartbreaking for me to reduce it from 4 to 2 because it's actually a very good card. But you'll understand why I did in a minute. Its inherited effect is when you use an option card of a cost of 2 or more, one of your opponent's Digimon gets -2000 DP for the turn. The next 2 cards I'm running is Daumon from EX4. This particular card, essentially, it's just a defensive card in not so many words, but you can return one of your opponent's Digimon with 6000 DP or less back to the owner's hand. Its inherited effect is exactly the same as the other Taumon I've just shown you. Use an option card of a cost of 2 or more, you can -2000 DP to one of your opponent's Digimon. Next up, 4 of mandatory Taumon from BT17. This Digimon comes with Barrier, which is extremely helpful. Thank you, Bandai. But it's when Digivolving effect. You may also use one option card that has a plugin in its name, or a yellow card from your hand with the cost reduced by 2. So it's really, really handy. Its inherited effect is exactly the same effect as long as you have Sakuyamon in name. So it is essentially restricted to this deck only, which is actually very good because at least the other variant yellow decks don't have to steal this card. But yeah, it's a good 4 of to have. You can play your option cards when and where you want to, and it's just solid generally. But having Barrier is definitely very much needed in this. Next up, we go to our level 6s. So we are running 2 of Sakuyamon Maid Mode. I mean, for obvious reasons, really. You can Digivolve on top of a level 5 for a cost of 3, or you can Digivolve for a cost of 2 on top of a level 6. When Digivolving, you can play an option card with a cost of, with plugin in its name, or has a cost of 5 or less and has to be a yellow card. You get to play it, and then you basically get to play that card and put it on top of your security. It also has a when attacking effect, but when you would attack, you for a cost of just 1, you can Digivolve into a Sakuyamon. So it does go very well with the EX2 Sakuyamon, with the whole unsuspend, obtain your plugin cards from trash and so forth. But in this particular instance, I'm not playing that. Not anymore. The new Sakuyamon from BT17 is now the game changer for this deck. It also comes with Barrier. You can Digivolve for a cost of 1 on top of the Maid Mode without having to use Maid Mode's when attacking effect. It's when Digivolving effect essentially lets you give one of your opponent's Digimon minus 6,000 for the turn. And then from your hand, you can use an option card of a cost of 5 or less that has plug-in in its name or is yellow. So it's basically a combination of Sakuyamon made mode as well as plug-in P, which you'll see shortly. The your turn effect is once per turn, but when you use an option card with a cost of 2 or more, until the end of your opponent's turn, their effects can't return this Digimon back to their hand or deck. So not only does it have battle protection now with the whole barrier effect, but it can also avoid bouncing effects to deck and hand. So it's a good 4 of, in my opinion. I was running a 2-2-2 split with the EX2 Sakuya, but sadly, I just don't think that card, it can't be protected anymore. It's just too many different types of decks out there that can easily remove. So yeah, just a 4 of is quite handy. Next up, we run a 1 of this lovely Shine Grey Burst mode from BT17. I can't take the credit for this card. I actually saw a player use this at locals and I thought it was a really, really good idea. So shout out to them if they're watching. But essentially, it's an ace card, so you can blast Digivolve when your opponent swings. It also has an on-play and when Digivolving effect where you get to play out a Tamer without paying the cost. And then for each Tamer that you have, you can give one of your opponent's Digimon minus 5,000 DP. So it's a good, Digimon killer almost, depending on what it is that you're going up against. But it also has a when attacking effect, but you can suspend up to 2 of your yellow Tamers. And if you have, you get security attack +1 for each of them. So it's also a very good aggressive card, if that's more your preference. But yeah, it's just a really, really good card to throw into the mix. It's certainly seen some gameplay with myself. So, next up, another level 7. Shine Grey Ruin mode. This is just a tech of my own, really. I have had it in the Sakuyamon deck since I've had it. I've only got the 1 card. This was one of those short printed secret rares, I guess. But this one, when Digivolving on deletion effect, until the end of your opponent's turn, all of your opponent's Digimon gets minus 5,000 EP. So it's a blanket board effect, which certainly does come in handy for wide boards. On top of that, you also have an end of attack effect, but you would delete this Digimon and one of your opponent's Digimon and then recover +1. Then if you have a Tamer in play, you can hatch a Digi-Egg into an empty space in your breeding area. So it's good for recycling as well. It's definitely a good card that fits in with this deck. It's obviously not searchable, but you're only you're only running a 1 of. So if you do find it, it's either going to be through Digivolving or it's already going to be in your hand at the start of the game. So yeah. But that's it in terms of Digimon. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to our Tamers. Now, the Tamers are, I'm running 6 in total now that we can. So let's go straight into it. We're running 4 of Rika from EX2. So she's your memory setter, so you'll always start on free memory. She also has a your turn effect, but ultimately, when you swing with a Renamon, Talmon, Cubimon, or Sakuyamon, as long as they're in the name, you can suspend this Tamer to use an option card or plugin in its name from your hand without paying the cost. She gels very, very well with this deck, and that's why I run 4 of. I have seen some deck profiles and some players at locals run less than 4. I really don't know why. I believe running 4 is definitely mandatory for this, just to make sure you always see it. And having more than 1 in play is actually beneficial for you because then you can maximize your turn using a variety of different effects. So she is definitely the core for this deck. And if you don't have this card out in play, you will struggle. So it's always to make sure you get this out into the play area before you go and cause some chaos. Next up, we have the new Rika from BT17. Now we're running 2 of them. You could run 1, however, I'm staying with 2. I just feel like you see it a little bit more often if you double your chances, of which this is what we've done. So, start of your main phase effect. If your opponent has a Digimon, you gain a memory. Your main effect, but if you have a Renamon in play, you can place this Tamer, Cubimon, and Talmon from your trash underneath that Renamon to warp Digivolve into a Sakuyamon for a Digivolution cost of 4, ignoring Digivolution requirements. If you have Digivolve using this effect, you can then return 1 option card from your trash back to your hand. So, having this alongside the memory setter, you're setting up that turn to warp, and ultimately, that I would certainly hope it would be a case of, you warp and then you're able to swing because it was on, the Tamer was in play the turn before, or the Renamon, sorry. But it's a good tool to have. Gaining 1 memory is, it's beneficial in any circumstance, really. But otherwise, just 2 of. You can probably swap it out for other Tamers, but it's ultimately up to you. But I'm running those 6. It just seems to gel quite well. Next up, option cards. So we run 1 offensive plugin A. If you're not familiar with this card, it's a 2 cost to play. If you have a Tamer in play, you can ignore its color requirements. But its main effect is you can give one of your Digimon security attack +1 for the turn. Security effect, you've revealed the top 3 cards of your deck. Add 1 Tamer card among them to your hand, place the rest at the bottom. And then you add this card to your hand. So you're setting yourself up for the turn. I'm only running 1 because, I mean, realistically, you don't want to go too aggressive with this deck. Yes, sure, you have Barrier, which is nice, but do you really want to eat through your security, knowing that you're only going to be able to swing for 2 checks on 1 swing, or if you're somehow able to unsuspend, there is that risk. And I don't think Sakuyamon is that aggressive in terms of the deck profile itself. And you're going to be going up against decks that are way stronger, so ideally you want a sense of control. So in my circumstance, that's why I've played it to this sort of form. So just a 1 of that card, but the next one I am playing 3 of Digivolution plugin S. Again, it's a 2 cost to play. You can ignore its color requirements if you have the Tamer in play. But this one is, again, part of the core for this deck. It gels really nicely with the EX2 Rika. When you swing with one of your Digimon, you draw 1 card, then you can Digivolve one of your Digimon for a Digivolution cost of 3 or less without paying the cost. The security effect lets you reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, and instead of picking a Tamer, you get to pick a Digimon card to your hand instead. And then you place, again, all of those cards to the bottom of the deck, and then add this card to your hand. So it is good to have a 3 of this particular card. You can run less if you choose to. I personally don't see why you would, but 3 is a good number to have. In some cases you could run 4. But yeah, it's a really good card just generally, but it gels very nicely with the Rika as well as the Sakuyamon top ends. So yeah, definitely a 3 of in my case. And then moving on lastly to my favourite card in this deck, we're running 2 of Pause plugin P. This one's a cost of 5 instead of the other versions, but again, I mean, you're not going to be bricking with this card because your deck is a yellow colour deck. But the main effect is that until the end of your opponent's turn, one of your opponent's Digimon gets minus 6,000 EP, and when Digivolving effects don't activate. So it's a blast killer. So even if your opponent was to suddenly blast into, as an example, let's just say that Shine Grey Burst mode, none of their effects are going to work. So its inherited effect, however, is slightly different, but you still get the DP reduction, so you minus 6,000 to one of your opponent's Digimon, but then you can also add this card to hand. You don't get the when Digivolving part of that in the security effect. This particular card gels really, really nicely with the new Sakuyamon, seeing as that card does the minus 6,000 as well. So you can do a 12,000 minus DP plus any of the inherited effects if you've got the relevant lineup, namely Renamon and Cubimon, as well as Talmon. So that could be a further 6,000. So you can bump it all the way up to, I think it's 18,000. And then if you're somehow able to get into ruin mode as well, you could go absolutely nuts. So yeah, it's definitely a 2 of, in my opinion. You could run more. I mean, you could take out the aggressive element and throw in the more controlling one. But there are so many different cards that you can choose. In terms of what we do in these videos normally is that I would now recommend alternative cards to various levels and lineups. But so yeah, let's just dive straight into that. But level 3 wise, in terms of the eggs, I definitely wouldn't change the eggs. If you really wanted to, try and play some of the more up-to-date yellow eggs, because they're a bit more relevant and a bit more beneficial. Level 3 wise, you could opt to throw in effect blockers. So things like Cupemon from BT5, which I believe, off the top of my head anyway, it doesn't allow your opponent to ignore Digivolution requirements. At the same time, you've got Pillowmon from, I think it's BT9, which doesn't let your opponents play Digimon by effects, or can't reduce play costs or something like that. But yeah, I don't really think you'll be sort of diving away from the Renamon line unless you're going to be picking Digimon that can block effects. Level 4s, again, you could just probably run a different variant of Cubimon, or you can increase the amount of Dalmons that are in there. Sorry, Yukomons. So you got EX2 Cubimon, which allows you to either trash an option card in your hand to draw 2 cards, or you can choose to return an option card with plugging in its name from your trash back to hand. That's EX2. Your BT5, I believe, has a Cubimon as well. But for the life of me, I can't seem to remember what that one does, so I'll just post it here in the video. And then level 5 wise, I mean, realistically, you can consider other Talmons. Alternatively, I mean, you can possibly do Angelwoman Ace or Magna Angemon Ace. They're pretty solid cards that you could throw in here for recovery aspects, or again, Angelwoman likes to DP reduce if you trash a card from your security, so she could go quite nicely in here. Which also reminds me, you could possibly run a Gatomon from BT15 as part of your level 4 range with the barrier inherited and whatnot. So that could go quite well. Level 6 wise, realistically, you're going to be opting for the Sakuyamon or Kazuhamon lineup. It really does depend on what your kind of game style is and what you prefer overall. But yeah, I don't think you'd need to play more than 6 level 6s. I mean, you could possibly run up to 8 if you were to make the room. But I definitely feel like the deck needs a level 7 in there somewhere. So that's why I've opted for 2 level 7s. Level 7 wise, naturally you can throw in Def-X if you really wanted to. Let's face it, you don't only ever hard play it anyway in a bad situation. Otherwise you can opt for an Omnimon variant like Merciful Mode or X-Antibody. But they all come with quite expensive Digivolution costs anyway, so Shine Grey Ruin Mode and Burst Mode seem to be more logical choices. Tamer wise, you could probably opt for Tai and Kari from BT9 or TK from BT1. They're all very good Tamer cards anyway, but gaining memory or searching security stacks can actually benefit you in the long run. So yeah. In terms of option cards, I mean, you've got multiple versions of plugin cards now. You've got the blue version. I can't remember if I think it's plugin D. But that one lets you gain jamming, can't be blocked. You've got the black version, which is giving one of your Digimon reboot and blocker, and can't be deleted by effects for the turn. You've got the white version, which gives one of your Digimon plus 3,000 EP. And And then there's the new one, which is the Recharge plugin Q, I think it's called, which ultimately gives one of your opponent's Digimon minus security attack by 1. So yeah, there are plenty of different versions that you could run. Alternatively, if you didn't want to run the plugins at all, and you had a majorly different build, you could just opt to run essentially any yellow card. Yellow option card. So things like Reinforcing Memory Boost. You've got Megalo Spark to assist with the DP reduction. On top of that, you've got Wyvern's Breath as well, which is actually very good. I think that's BT7, BT8, something like that. So yeah, there are different versions that you can run. But again, it naturally just depends on what kind of preference you want to see in your build. But that's it. That's everything off the top of my head. That's my 50 card deck for Sakuyamon. Yeah, there might be changes. If there are, stay tuned on the channel and I'll post up what's been sort of amended on the community page. But as always, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope it inspires your own builds. If for any reason, there's something that you would change, just, leave a comment underneath the video. I'll be sure to check it out and we can discuss. If you haven't supported the channel already by subscribing, you know what to do. Hit that little subscription button. And as always, just hit that little thumbs up symbol for the video just to show your support. But otherwise, thanks again and take care.